Hello, boys and girls. Greg here from the Scary Spirits Podcast to make you another cocktail. This week's cocktail is called Satan's Spawn, and it is the featured cocktail in today's episode. Today's cocktail is a shot. We're going to take our shot glass, cinnamon schnapps. Hot damn. Cinnamon schnapps. 1 ounce. 1 ounce cinnamon schnapps. I think we all know where this is going. To that we add 3 or 4 dashes hot sauce. This is my wife's favorite. So that's about 1 teaspoon, I would say. There we go. There you have it. The fire, or the Satan's Spawn. Hot and spicy. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoy the podcast. See ya.
I don't know about you, but it might take me a little longer than a few hours to process the discovery that I was, in fact, the Antichrist, especially at 13 years old. But not so for Damien in this week's episode of the Scary Spirits Podcast, Damien Omen II. Once he discovers the incriminating 666 on the back of his head, he has one good scream at the end of a doc, and he's embraced his destiny. I guess I'm just not Antichrist material. I wonder how long it took Greg to process. Cheers!
Welcome to the Scary Spirits Podcast. Please be advised that the presenters may use adult language and/or discuss adult situations. This podcast is not intended for younger listeners or those that may be easily offended. So, if you're ready, let's go.
Hi, I'm Greg.
And I'm Karen.
And welcome to the Scary Spirits Podcast, the podcast that combines the two very different yet highly compatible worlds of scary films and alcoholic spirits.
What could possibly go wrong?
Indeed. How are you, Karen?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you, Greg?
I'm good. I'm good, Karen. Thank you for asking.
Of course, it's what we do.
All right, Karen, I believe this film was my choice. Was it not?
Yes, Greg, this was your choice. What'd you choose for us this week?
It had to have been because it's so awesome.
Is it?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
The film I have chosen, Karen, is from 1978. Remember 1978?
Yeah, there was actually, was it 78 or 79? That was the big blizzard in Cincinnati.
One of those. 77, 78.
Where we went to school like 2 days in January or something like that. I think it was 78. Might have been 79,
Could
though.
have been. I don't think it was 79. I think it was earlier than that. But anyway, the film is Damien Omen II.
Why did you choose this film?
Well, Karen, March 6th was the 61st birthday of Jonathan Scott Taylor.
Okay.
He plays
Is he still
Damien.
with us?
He is still with us. Yes, he plays Damien.
Did he act after this?
He did a few things. Not a whole lot, though. So happy 61st birthday, Jonathan.
Yeah, I'm sure he's listening.
I do have a drink
also, Karen.
Excellent. You want to tell everybody what it is?
It is called the Satan's Spawn.
Well, that's appropriate.
I thought so. See what I did there?
Very clever.
Would you like to know how to make it?
Yes, of course.
I don't have my notes, but I think I can do it from memory, Karen.
I sure hope so.
So this drink is a shot. So
My favorite.
Yeah, basically we're going to need 1 ounce of cinnamon schnapps. The recipe calls for Firewater cinnamon schnapps. I used hot damn cinnamon schnapps. 1 ounce of that.
Lightning 101.
And put 1 ounce in a shot glass of that. Then you add 3 or 4 dashes of Tabasco sauce or your hot sauce of preference. I did not use Tabasco. I used the other ones, Karen, that begins with a C. Because that's the one my wife likes. So that's what we have.
You're not going to mention it?
Cholula? Is that what it is? Cholula?
I don't know.
Chile-based hot sauce manufactured in Mexico, Karen. And licensed by Jose Cuervo.
Oh, nice. He's branching out.
I guess.
I just used Red Hot. You know, where people put that shit on everything.
Yep.
Isn't that their slogan or whatever? And I only used 2.
Should we give our friends and listeners time to make their own shot?
You can probably do half the time of the music. I think they can do it.
I don't know. They got to run to the kitchen or their bar, pull everything out.
Find a shot glass.
Yep.
Well, you don't have to have a shot glass to take a shot, do you? Can you put a shot in a regular glass?
You
probably can.
I guess, but
you
didn't have any problem finding a shot glass, did you, Karen? Since you collect them.
Yes, since I collect them. Exactly.
All right, hold on. And we're back.
Yes, we are.
Hi, Karen. Might you have a brief synopsis for this film?
I do.
Go on. Tell me a story.
Richard and Ann Thorn have taken their 13-year-old nephew, Damian, into their Chicago home following the death of Richard's brother 7 years earlier. The Thorns love the child, whom they are sending to military school, but not everyone is so sanguine about his presence. Soon after Great Aunt Marion expresses concerns about the boy, she dies suddenly and unexpectedly, and she is certainly not the last.
Thank you, Karen, for that brief synopsis. What does sanguine mean?
Sanguine?
Sanguine? Yeah.
I think it means positive, like having a positive attitude.
Optimistic or positive, Karen?
Well, there you go.
Especially in an apparent bad or difficult situation.
Well, that would apply.
It's also another word for the color blood red.
Yeah, I thought it was a color too.
Which I find interesting.
There's a lot of red in this movie too, I thought.
All right, Karen, are you ready to get into it?
Well, before we start, I actually have questions. Which you will know better than I do because... Questions
before we start.
Well, more of a question, a timeline question.
Okay.
Richard's brother died.
Son. Yes.
Yeah. And they took in his son who died 7 years earlier. And in this movie, he's 13.
The brother died 7 years earlier, yes.
So was the kid really 6? Didn't he look like he was about 4?
No, I'd say he was about 6.
Really? Because I thought he was a lot younger than that. Okay, that's all. It just didn't add up to me. I kept thinking he was not a toddler, but I thought he was,
maybe he's a little young, but
when he turned around and looked in that final shot, he looked like he was about 4 years old. And also, it seemed to me in the previous movie, and again, you will correct me, I'm sure, he seemed to know what he was doing in the previous movie. Don't you think?
No, I don't think he did.
Okay. Because I just interpreted that wrong, because I thought he did. So those two things didn't add up to me in this movie, just timeline wise and awareness.
No,
So
I don't think he knew what he was doing.
you think the adults were just making him do it? And the Rottweiler?
Yeah.
He was killing people.
Who did he kill, Karen?
The babysitter.
He didn't kill her.
Who did?
She did. She killed herself. She jumped out the window and hung herself.
And the mother?
Well, he accidentally knocked the mother off the chair and made her fall down the landing.
But she didn't die until she jumped out the window.
True. So she killed herself too.
All right. Well, I just thought they didn't connect very well, but that obviously I was wrong. So yeah. I thought he was way younger.
He didn't decapitate the photographer. It was a freak accident.
But his presence causes all that. Well, that's true, but I thought he knew what he was doing with the babysitter. The
photographer was nowhere near him when that happened.
I gave you the photographer.
He was in a completely different country.
Well, so are most of these people away from him. But I'm talking about the mother and the babysitter. I thought he stared up at the babysitter and then she killed herself. And then he was riding his tricycle and put the mother in the hospital. And then.
No, he wasn't staring at the babysitter yelled his name, which made him look up. She was already well on her way. It's the animals, Karen.
All right. I just thought it didn't add up.
Those Rottweilers. Those evil Rottweilers. Okay. Any other questions?
No, those are my only two things that didn't make sense to me. That have to do with the overall story without giving away any.
And Jonathan Scott Taylor was 11 years old, even though he's playing someone who's 13.
But they're calling him 13. And he could pass for 13. He looks young, but it's hard to tell in that age.
He's a pretty mature 11. Are we ready to get into it now, Karen?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen this before, Karen?
No. And you have?
Yeah.
Often?
A few times.
Okay.
But even though I have, there's still things you forget or miss or whatever. So.
You watch on Amazon?
I did.
I did too. Thought maybe you had a DVD with commentary.
I did not. Do not for this one. So it's rated R, Karen. We see no warnings. So when the movie starts, no warnings out about blood or alcohol or devil worship or anything like that.
Nope.
Horrific scenes. We start with credits. And as the credits are rolling, the man who we know from the last film as Bugenhagen is driving through Israel.
So it's the same actor?
Yes.
Okay.
But he's not credited in this, but I believe it is the same actor. And he meets up with Michael Morgan. And he shows him the newspaper article with a picture of Damian. And the headline is U.S. Ambassador and Wife Buried in Washington. So this is right after the end of the first film, right?
Yes. Do you want to say this is the dude that gave the dad the daggers to kill his son? That's how they're connected.
Yeah. And
so he sees that Damien was not killed, but the parents are both being buried.
Yes.
Which is why he's upset.
Correct. So he talks about Yagail's Wall.
Yeah. Did you look it up?
I did.
It's not real. I was bummed.
It is not real. It is a heavy metal thrash band from San Francisco, though.
Well, yeah. And they do mention something that I did look up. So they say it's on a tel in Israel, Tel, correct? Well, they say that a couple times. I didn't know what that was. So one way of knowing where to organize an archaeological
Tel Megiddo, actually.
Yeah, that's where they found it. So one way of knowing where to organize an archaeological dig is to look for a tel. A tel is a mound or small hill that has been built up over several centuries of occupation. It is formed through the accumulation of remains of repeated building activities and occupations as towns and villages were built and destroyed and then rebuilt, each new settlement placing its foundation on top of what the earlier dwellers left behind. So if you were to slice through the tell, you would see a series of layers or strata, each representing one period of the site's history. I just didn't know what a tell was, and they mentioned it a couple times. And now we do.
Yep.
Look at that tell off in the distance, Craig. Where should we dig? Why, right over there. Yeah. How about that tell over there? Wish we'd have known that when we were watching The Mummy.
So the wall basically contains 4 faces of the Antichrist as through life, right? It has him as a child, as a teenager, I guess, as we see later, and I guess as an adult too, but we don't see it because, then that could ruin the sequel.
True. They do say at some point, and his destruction. Did you hear him say that later? There's 4 panels, but anyway, Carl is trying to convince Michael to go and see it. And Michael's like, I'm an archaeologist. I am not a religious fanatic. Just the facts.
But Bugenhagen does explain to him that he did give Damien's father the daggers. That
he does tell him that,
try to kill him. But Michael's not convinced. They go to Yagael's wall to look at it.
Michael's resistant, but Bugenhagen is persistent, and he finally gives in. And when they arrive, it's kind of funny that Michael looks a little put off by Bugenhagen's driving. He's like, whoa. He looks a little shaken before they even go down into the, I wanted to say built into the dig.
And we see a raven, Karen.
Yeah, no one's there.
Hanging out.
Except for the raven.
So they go into the tunnel, into the, the dig. And there's a statue down there, I guess, called the Whore of Babylon.
Yes. Do you want to know about the Whore of Babylon?
Absolutely.
I'm sure you do.
The Whore of Babylon.
The Whore of Babylon is an allegorical and apocalyptic figure of evil found in the Christian Bible and one of several incarnations of evil that plague the world during the end of days. She is depicted as a beautiful woman who is the mother of all harlots and of all abominations of the world. That's a big job, I would say. According to the Christian Bible's Book of Revelation, the Whore of Babylon, also known as the Great Whore by the Romans, is said to be dressed in purple and scarlet and wearing gold and precious jewelry. So she's thought to represent other known things. The first is Rome, the capital of the European country of Italy, particularly the old Roman Empire because of the sordid history with greed, brutality, debauchery, and paganism. And the second is the Roman Catholic Church because of its past years of conduct of multiple religious persecutions and inquisitions. That's a very controversial interpretation. But she's said to arrive on Earth riding a fabulous yet terrible scarlet monster with multiple 7 heads, carrying a golden cup full of filth and deceit, becoming drunk on the blood of martyrs and saints. Although frightening and powerful, the Whore of Babylon is destined to be betrayed and slain by the beast as part of the apocalypse. I like that. A cup full of filth and deceit. So, yeah, some people say it represents the Catholic Church. That upsets the Catholic Church very much. And there are multiple articles of how that can't possibly be true. But then there are multiple articles of how it is true. But in this movie, they do say it represents Rome.
And it is a statue depicting a half-naked woman riding a 7-headed dragon-like beast with 10 horns.
Yes.
The woman is arched back, drinking from a large chalice.
Well, what does that chalice hold?
I don't know, whatever you said.
Filth and deceit, Greg. And
Filth
the blood of martyrs and saints. I mean, go big or go home, right?
Yeah. But then they see the painting of the wall, and you see a painting of Damien as a child looking like Medusa.
I said that too. It does look like Medusa. There's snakes all over his head.
Then all of a sudden, there's a cave in, Karen, and they are trapped.
After they both look at it and recognize Damien from the picture. They're trying to get out and all the rocks fall. So they turn around and what happens? Rocks fall again.
Yes. And then sand seeps through the bricks in the ceiling, and they are buried alive, Karen.
Yeah.
There you go.
So just, when you think they could dig out, the sand starts to come in.
I'm going to keep a death count. We got two. Two.
I said that would be a terrible way to go.
It would be. Next, we are in Chicago 7 years later, because that's what it says on the screen, Karen.
Well, I do want to say, while they're trapped in there and the whole place is collapsing, right? I'm also a little confused, too, as to why Bugenhagen, he starts preaching. He starts saying verses from
praying,
Right.
whatever.
But prayer doesn't help you because, and it's just curious to me that, the devil is on one end, you think, and God is on the other, and they're asking for help from God, but none arrives in their prayer.
Nope. The Lord helps those who help themselves, Karen.
Apparently. But they couldn't help themselves. They were stuck.
So it's fall and they're burning leaves, and we see Damien walking behind the flames towards the camera.
Yes, very poignant scene.
It's a nice shot. I like that shot. And I guess Damien and Mark, his cousin, are going off to school. Damien says goodbye to Aunt Marion, and they have a little tense moment there.
Yeah, she doesn't believe that he actually wants to say goodbye to her. Who made you come say goodbye to me? She's a bitter old woman.
And Richard, who is Mark's father,
yes,
Damien's uncle, gives them each an envelope of cash just in case of emergency while they're at school. Mark goes to say goodbye to Aunt Marion because his father reminds him.
And he's carrying a bugle, correct?
He's carrying a trumpet.
Okay, so what's the difference between a trumpet and a bugle?
A trumpet has valves, a bugle does not.
So does a bugle play the same, what's the right key all the time? Sort of, or?
You control that with your mouth. Embouchure, I think is what they call it, Karen.
Okay. So it is a trumpet. I said trumpet, but then later they mention a bugle, and I thought maybe I was wrong.
It looked like a trumpet to me.
It did to me too, but then anyway, it's not that important.
Well, it could be, actually, I misspoke, Karen. Bugles do have valves. At least current day bugles do. Back in like the Civil War, they did not. You know what I mean? They just had it was just like a horn, right?
Mm-hmm.
But bugles today have 2 valves.
And trumpets have 3.
Have 3, yes.
Okay.
So it could have been a bugle, I guess. I didn't really pay much attention. I didn't count the valves, Karen.
Okay. It was just a music thing, and there's bugles later, and it's not important to the plot at all. I was just asking because I know you know music things, and I thought it would be interesting to know.
So Mark goes to say goodbye to Aunt Marion, and I wrote, I don't think Marion trusts Damien. She tells Mark to stay away from him. But the boys drive off in the Mercedes-Benz 600 Pullman, Karen.
Nice.
And they talk about Aunt Marion. And she
Yes.
smells like lavender, Karen. Because, of course, Karen, she does. Because all old ladies douse themselves in lavender. Correct?
Yes. Can you smell the lavender from here off of me?
No, I cannot, Karen.
I'll get you a scratch and sniff. So, Karen's here. Get the lavender out.
Next, we see Richard, Marion, and who we learn is Charles having dinner. Marion wants the boys separated and sent to 2 separate schools, and she threatens to leave her share of Thorn Industries to Richard if they refuse.
No, to Charity if they refuse.
Oh, to Charity?
Not to Richard. To take the money. She's threatening to not give him the inheritance because right now he gets it all. And it was like $100 million or something ridiculous, wasn't it? I don't know the number, but it was big. I think it's 100 million. But Aunt Marion berates Anne a little bit, says she doesn't care about her. The interesting thing about this, at least to me, was Aunt Marion's a very unlikable character. I mean, she's just not likable, but she's telling the truth, but you don't like her, so it's an interesting juxtaposition there that she's seeing the truth and trying to warn them and protect them and all of that, trying to protect Mark, but she comes off as a horrible person. And that happens more than once in the movie, I think.
And she wants Mark kept away from Damien. And they argue. Anne says she wants Aunt Marion gone in the morning. She wonders why she hates Damien so much. Then Charles, Dr. Charles, I guess he's a doctor, shows Richard and Anne a slideshow of relics from the dig in Megiddo, apparently, because it includes photos of the Whore of Babylon, Karen.
But before they do that, I just wanted to note that Anne is very defensive of Damien. You know, she says she begs Richard not to believe and not to listen to Aunt Marion. And I saw early on, I was like, is she a plant? Like she overzealously defends Damien and says, you know, don't listen. But basically, yes, she is very adamant that Aunt Marion is gone in the morning. Charles watches this whole thing, this family blow up, and then just says, okay, let's go look at the slides now. He's like, well, it is what it is, but I'm not missing my shot to show my 35 millimeter slides. So let's go in the other room and do that.
And they do.
They do.
And then Richard, after they're looking at the Whore of Babylon, he recites some scripture from the Book of Revelations. Don't know exactly what, but
Richard or Charles? Who does that?
Charles does.
Okay. And he's talking about the Whore of Babylon. She represents Rome, he says. 10 horns of the beast, or 10 kings who have no kingdoms yet.
And in one of the photographs, there's a picture of a woman, and Richard wants to know who the woman is. Charles says, that's my friend Joan Hart. She was doing a story about Bugenhagen. And by the way, she would like to interview Richard. Richard doesn't want to do it. Then we see Marion in her bedroom, and a raven appears, Karen.
She's fallen asleep having been reading her Bible because it's on her chest, and it's a red Bible.
Okay.
Did you notice that?
Did not. But there's some eye play with the raven there.
Yes. And Latin chanting. In the beginning, she goes and opens the door to her balcony for the evening and gets in bed and falls asleep reading her Bible. So the doors to her room facing the outdoors are open, and the raven comes in.
Marion has a heart attack. She gone. Cut to the military school, the Davidson Military Academy, Karen.
Yes.
Boys are marching.
Any comment on the percussion skills?
I do. I did make a note, Karen.
Okay.
I said the snare line is not very clean. Sounds like a bunch of gobbledygook a little bit. I need practice, but it is fall. I mean, it's the beginning of the year. They'll get better, I'm sure.
They'll tighten it up.
They'll tighten it up. And the boys meet their new platoon leader, Sergeant Daniel Neff. Sergeant tells the Thorn boys that they will get no special treatment, Karen, even though their name is, famous around there because
it's probably on half the buildings.
Yeah. Their father and grandfather and everybody went there, apparently. And we cut to the Thorn building.
Richard's going to work.
Established 1889, Karen. Thorn Industries. Richard arrives at the office. He and Bill discuss Paul, who we haven't met yet. But Bill is not thrilled with what Paul is proposing, whatever that is. We don't know yet. Cut back to the estate, the Thorn estate, I guess, Karen, is what I'm going to call it. Anne finds Aunt Marion in her room, dead on the floor.
Yes, she comes in. You need to get moving or you'll miss your plane. Because she's leaving in the morning for sure, right?
Yeah.
But she's on the floor. She dead. Add one to your count.
Then we see Richard, Paul, Bill, and Dr. Passarian touring the Thorn plant, I wrote. And Paul believes their future is in famine.
Yeah, Paul looks like Mr. Brady.
Yes, he does.
It was distracting.
Confused, yeah.
It's distracting to me. So I called him Mr. Brady multiple times in here. But it's interesting, too, that he says their future is in famine, which right away pegs him as a bad guy, because you could phrase it differently and come across less evil.
Yes.
Our future is in feeding
He just
the
wants
world.
to say he wants to save starving people. That's what he wants to do, really.
But he keeps saying famine and he puts everyone off. And that's the truth, because that's what he's planning as an evil person. So he's actually speaking the truth. When people push back, he's like, there's nothing wrong with feeding people.
Yes.
But he talks about what he wants to do is control other countries by withholding food. So he wants to somehow...
Well, he wants to buy their land and plant crops to feed the people, Karen.
He wants to corner the market on food, basically.
Okay.
Because he said, your arms are at your side if your belly is empty. So you're not going to fight if somebody's going to feed you.
But Bill believes it is unethical. And he shelves the project. Bill is like the president of Thorn Industries. Then Richard gets a call about Aunt Marion. Got back to the Davidson Military Academy. The boys are outside the new sergeant's office waiting to see him, because he said he would meet with them each one at a time. While Mark is in their meeting with the sergeant, one of the other boys teases Damien about the Thorn heritage. And Damian warns him to never talk about his father again. And I think he means it, Karen.
I believe he does.
By the look in his eyes.
But they're teasing him, saying he's full of himself, that he's arrogant. Damien is.
Then Damian meets with Sergeant Neff. Sergeant Neff tells Damian that if he has any problems, to come to him day or night.
He's going over his records. He's pretty good in school, but not great at the military stuff. It's like needs improvement.
Sergeant explains that he was an orphan just like Damian. So they have a connection, Karen.
But he's not an orphan anymore. He's been adopted. Damien's a good football player. They go over that too.
Apparently.
Do you remember those old report cards where you were in grade school and it would be, I don't know, excellent, good, needs improvement? That's what his grades are. Excellent,
very good, excellent, good.
But then when it comes to
needs improvement.
Needs improvement.
Yes, I do remember, Karen.
Did you have a few needs improvements?
I did, Karen.
Talks to others.
Yes. Fails to keep his hands to himself.
I think we've talked about that before.
So Damien comes out, and the boy who was teasing him is on top of Mark, and they are fighting. Because Mark, punched the guy after Damien went in.
Because they kept teasing him about being a thorn.
And then Damien gives him the eye, Karen.
And the chanting in Latin starts,
yes.
Which I didn't know if they could hear or only we could hear, but I think it's only us.
Only us. Yeah. The boy is thrown against the wall or a door, and he collapses to the ground. He struggles as the boys watch.
He's trying to fight off something he can't see.
Yeah.
We can't see. It looks like he can see something coming at him.
The sergeant comes out and breaks it up. Outside, Mark confronts Damien. Damien says he doesn't know what happened. No idea. And then they go for a race around the grounds. Cut to Paul and Richard, and looks like they're having breakfast. They have breakfast in the office, it looks like.
Yeah, because he said, we'll have a breakfast meeting, because Paul had to leave because of the phone call. So he says, we'll have a breakfast meeting tomorrow. And they do.
Okay. Richard tells Paul that he agrees with Bill and that the famine project will be shelved. Paul offers to step down, and Richard convinces him not to. He says, your time will come. Bill's old. Older, anyway. As Richard is leaving the office, Joan Hart stops him and convinces him to talk to her in his car.
So here she is in a bright red coat with bright red lips. And I thought, is she supposed to be the whore of Babylon? Because that's what they describe her as wearing, but I don't think it is. She's a reporter that is friends with Dr. Charles, who wants to interview him. And She says she must talk to him. She's very pushy. It's urgent. He's trying to put her off. He has to go to the airport. He doesn't want to talk to her, but she convinces him that he needs to talk to her. So she gets in the car with him to drive to the airport.
And then she starts in on him about Bugenhagen, and his skeleton was found, and they've proven it was him. And she was a friend of the photographer who was decapitated. And why did your brother try to kill Damien? It's true. I've seen the wall. It's all true. So Richard throws her out of the car.
Well, he has the car stop first.
Yes.
But yes, he says he doesn't want to talk about it anymore. Get out of the car. And she's screaming that you have to have Christ protect you. Only Christ can protect you, which she's saying, which is why I'm wondering why the guy at the dig is trying to use Christ to protect him, or maybe he was quoting Old Testament. I don't know. Was he quoting Old Testament or New Testament?
I don't know.
But Christ didn't help him. So why? Anyway, he drives off without her.
But she tries to convince him that he is in danger.
And again, she's not a very likable character. She's pushy. She's, you don't
Fanatical.
like her. Yeah, you don't like her. But again, she's telling the truth, but you don't like her very much.
Then we cut to the Thorn Museum, which I said looks a lot like the Field Museum. Pretty sure it is. You ever been to the Field Museum in Chicago?
No.
That's where that was filmed. I'm 99% sure. And Charles is telling Anne about Ygail's wall, and they're going to display the whore of Babylon, Karen, which Charles says, I know you like that statue a lot, or something.
It's her favorite statue, kind of like, what's his name is my favorite actor. She didn't seem to like it, I didn't think, when he showed it to her at the estate. But apparently they're bringing it over. So I guess this means that Richard paid for the dig in Israel, so he gets all the stuff that they dig up.
Yeah, Thorn Industries, right? They have a museum, and they're procuring, artifacts for the museum.
That's what we'll call it, procuring.
The public should see it, Karen.
They could see it in Israel.
Then Joan Hart joins them, and just then Charles's beeper goes off.
Yes, a pager.
And he needs to go make a phone call. Then Joan begins.
Are you going to explain to the youngins what a beeper is?
No, I'm not.
Okay. All right.
It's a pocket pager.
You'd get a number. It would show up. I never had one. Did you?
I did.
I never had one. But a lot of doctors had them first. It's a little, less than the size of a pack of cigarettes for sure.
Oh yeah,
and it
about half the size of a pack of cigarettes.
Clipped on your belt, and it would buzz, and then you would look down at it, and there would be a number for you to call. It was kind of like a message. So people would call your pager number, and it would beep, and you would put in your number, which would show up on the pager, and then the person would see the number and call you back. So he runs off to call whatever number has called him.
Then Joan begins to question Anne about Damien. Just then Charles runs back in and stops them. He tells Anne not to say another word, that Richard is furious with Joan. Doesn't want to have anything to do with her. So next we see Joan going to watch a football practice.
She does tell Charles and Anne, you're in grave danger. I've seen Ygail's wall. Even after he tells her to shut up, she continues to say that you're in danger. But then that she goes to watch football practice.
And she asked one of the other men sitting there watching the practice, which one is Damien Thorn? And he says, oh, he's the wide receiver right over there. And just then Damien takes off his helmet, and he and Joan lock eyes, I guess, or something. And Joan has a look of horror on her face.
Well, she recognizes him, and Latin starts again. So I will say that I really like her coat. It's this red, beautiful coat with a big red fur collar on it. She looks really good in it. But she leaves immediately in her red coat. And what's she doing in the car?
She's reciting the Lord's Prayer, Karen.
Yes, she is.
And she's
And
driving.
is it going to help her?
Nope.
No, it's not.
She's driving along and there is a clunk and her car stalls. She pulls to the side of the road. She cannot restart it. She gets out, sees a farm across the way there, decides to try to make it there, and she grabs her purse. Just then, a raven appears, Karen, and begins attacking her and pulling her hair and poking her eyes out.
Is it poking her eyes?
It is.
I couldn't tell. But I'm like,
Yes.
can a raven kill you?
She and the raven struggle. She winds up in a ditch, but gets up when she hears a truck coming and staggers out into the road to try to stop it, but she can't see. She got no eyes. Truck hits her and runs her over. She gone. Cut to Mark's birthday party and a ride in snowmobiles. Mark goes to cut his cake, and it is a cake made to look like a frozen lake with people playing hockey, or I guess, on top of it. Mark cuts it to it right in the center of the lake. Someone says, "There goes the lake." I think that might be foreshadowing, Karen.
You think?
I think so. Then Bill and Paul have a moment. Bill once again talks to Paul about his plan and says that it is unethical. Next, Paul and Damian have a moment, Karen.
Yes, they do.
Paul tells Damian that Thorn Industries will one day be his and that he should learn about what the company does.
He offers to give him a tour. But he also asks, do you like Sergeant Neff? Damien asks, do you know him? And what's his name? Paul? Because I call him Mr. Brady. He says, oh, I asked around.
I checked up on him.
Yeah.
Just looking out for you, Damien.
We're all just keeping an eye on you. That's what he says.
He offers to take Damien on the tour, and Damien asks if he can bring some of the boys from school. So sure. And Paul and Damien stare at each other.
So he does say that Thorn Industries will all be his one day. And Damien says, well, and Mark's. We should say he has a strong relationship with Mark.
Does. They're like brothers.
Yeah, they really do enjoy each other or like each other. There's no animosity there at all.
None. Then there's fireworks for Mark's birthday.
Yeah, they went all out.
So while everyone's out at the window watching the fireworks, Paul talks to Damien about puberty.
Yes, he does. And manhood.
This part's a little creepy to me, but...
You think? It plays different now, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
You know, when a boy turns 13, it's the beginning of manhood. Many cultures have initiation rites. You'll be initiated soon, Damien.
Damien says he does feel like something is happening to him.
Yes, he does. It's time to put aside childish things and be initiated and face up to who you are. Paul's creepy.
Yeah. Next, we see everyone playing hockey on a frozen lake, and they're having a barbecue in winter.
And right before that, Mark does come to get Damien and tells him to come watch the fireworks, which again is another example of, hey, he notices, hey, Damien's not here. He's missing this. I'm going to go get him. So again, they have a good relationship.
As everyone's playing hockey, we see a raven on a tree limb, Karen.
Which cannot be good.
Nope. So they're playing hockey, and somebody knocks the puck, away, actually off the hockey rink, because they haven't marked out. I mean, there's cones. So Bill goes after the puck. He clearly goes past the blue cone, which is the boundary, Karen.
Paul grabs Damien because Damien's starting to chase the puck. Paul grabs him and Bill passes them and goes off the rink. So Paul saves him from going.
I've seen it many times and never noticed that, Karen.
Oh, he wraps his arms around him and stops him.
But nothing would happen to Damien.
No. But the plan is the plan. So Bill goes after it.
So I wrote, it looks like the lake is marked where the ice is safe. But Bill goes past that and he falls and goes under the ice. He tries to break through from under, the water, and the people above are trying to break the ice above him. and they follow him with the current. The current in the lake is taking him away, Karen.
I was trying to find out if there are currents in lakes because you wouldn't think there would be, but apparently there are small currents, but this is a pretty strong current.
Well, it's got to be fed by some stream or something.
But that would be the exact place. And it would be frozen too, the stream, pretty much at this point.
But the current is still underneath.
Yeah, but it just seemed he's moving pretty fast.
He is.
They all spread out on the lake to try to see where he is so they can follow him.
Charles gets an axe and tries to bust through, but Bill comes up in a hole where the tree is that the raven was on. And he catches his breath, then he gets pulled back under, and he gone.
Immediately, yeah. They give you a moment where maybe he's not going to die. No, he's dead. Add him to the tally.
Hello, boys and girls. You know, doing a podcast can be thirsty work. Lucky for you, we have all our drink recipes on our website, scaryspirits.com. And if you want to see how each drink is made, hit up our YouTube channel, Scary Spirits Podcast, and watch me play bartender. I show you how to make every themed drink. Now, back to the show.
Next, we see Richard promoting Paul as the new president of Thorn Industries, replacing Bill.
Yeah, that happened faster than we thought.
And Richard says him and Ann are going on a vacation.
Yeah, he says you're going to be alone as president for a while because we're going to take a vacation. I thought, that's not good.
Next, we see Paul at the office, and
now he's arriving in the fancy car.
Yes,
right.
His picture's on the cover of Fortune magazine, Karen.
Is that still published?
I don't know. And Paul meets with Richard, because I guess Richard's back. Apparently, Paul has begun buying land without discussing it with Richard, and Richard is not happy. He is moving along with his famine project, and Richard still says, well, he greenlighted it, but he still wants to have the final say-so of everything.
Well, he told him it was too early. So 2 weeks later is not later. He said, we'll revisit it later. And Paul just went ahead with it. And I said, Richard should have fired him right there because he went ahead and didn't consult him at all. And he said, Bill would have consulted me. And Paul says, well, I'm not Bill.
That's right.
So basically, suck it.
Got back to the Davidson Military Academy. The boys are learning about Napoleon, Karen. And they're drawing caricatures of their teacher, I believe, and laughing. Or Damian laughs.
In the back row, yeah. Did you ever do that?
Nah.
But you must have passed notes. Come on.
Probably. Damian gets called to the front of the room. The teacher begins questioning him about Napoleon's campaign.
Yeah, because they're laughing in the back and the teacher's pissed. Get up here. You think you know everything about Napoleon? Right. Why don't you just prove it? And he starts rapid fire questions.
And Damian knows all the answers, Ken.
Yes, he does.
Then he starts questioning him about other dates. He totally gets off Napoleon and starts talking about
totally random
dates, like Socrates.
Lincoln, Taft, like all these different. And Damien knows them all.
Rattles them right off without even thinking.
Almost before he finishes the question.
Sergeant Neff enters and interrupts, and he takes Damien out into the hall.
Yeah, he chastises him.
Yeah, Sergeant Neff tells Damien he's showing off.
Well, the teacher then tells the kids, copy the blackboard, and storms out.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of funny.
Sergeant Neff tells Damien he must not attract attention to himself, and he tells him to read the Bible. Read the 13th chapter in the book of Revelations, he tells him.
Well, he says, don't attract attention. The day will come when everyone knows who you are. But this is not that day. And then tells him to go read the Bible.
Tells him it's about him.
Yeah, it'll tell him who he is.
Next, we see Damien carrying a Bible to his room, and I wrote it's a nice shot.
It is.
As the band's coming down the stairs, and we see him walking away. It's a pretty good shot. I like it. And Damien begins reading about the beast. And we have a montage of the marching band as he reads.
Yeah, I don't know why they did that, but it's true.
He says, "Here is wisdom. Let him who hath wisdom count the number of the beast. For it is a number of a man. His number is 666. I believe there's a song called The Number of the Beast, Karen, I think it's Iron Maiden.
I believe it is.
Next, we see Damien in the bathroom, holding a mirror, searching his head for the mark of the beast.
Well, doesn't it say somewhere it'll be on your hand or your, I thought it said forehead.
In the Bible, I believe it does talk about people being marked with the number of the beast, either on their hand or, their
Forehead, they said, but he knows where to look for some reason. He's looking at the back of his head.
And he finds it.
With double mirrors, like he's looking
Yes.
like a selfie almost, but he's holding two mirrors.
He finds
it, yeah. And he's actually upset.
Quite upset, I wrote. And he runs. And I wrote, "Run, Forrest, run." So he ends up at the end of a dock and screams at the sky, "Why me?"
As you do.
Yes.
There are times where everybody needs to go to the dock and scream, "Why me?"
Next, it's the end of the day, I guess, and they're playing taps. And Mark is Damien's roommate, apparently, and he is concerned about Damien. Damien says, "It'll be fine. Go to bed."
Yeah, he seems to have come to terms with it already. And taps is playing, which I kind of tried to look up, but it just is played at the end of the day in the military. It just means lights out. I couldn't find anything else meaningful, but they do play it at
just like they play revelry at the beginning
funerals.
of the day.
Yeah. It's a very heart-wrenching melody. Maybe it's because it's associated with funerals so much. I find it very sad, not just lights out. It's emotional, I think.
Next, we see Dr. Passerian arriving on a plane. He uses a payphone and calls Richard, but he is out riding in a sleigh with Anne.
Yes.
So Passerio calls Paul. Paul tells him he better come over right away.
So Passerian was in some previous scenes where they're talking about the famine stuff. I don't know if we really mentioned him that often, but he's part of that. There's four of them.
He played the psychologist on MASH.
He did. That's right.
The guy who plays him. Yeah.
Okay.
Sydney. What's his name? Sydney something?
Portier? No, that's not Sidney Portier.
But the character on MASH is named Sydney.
I can't remember. But yes, he does. Now that you say that, I didn't recognize him there.
Yeah, you might catch that on Me TV, boys and girls.
MASH.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Passerian tells Paul that while he was out trying to buy land, 3 of the people who refused to sell were mysteriously killed.
Strangled. Murdered. Paul kind of smiles, but is trying to act appalled.
Yeah, he says he hopes we don't have any overzealous people in the field.
Yes, and then he grins. He knows exactly what's going on in the fields.
Yep. Then we cut to Damien and his classmates arriving at the Thorn factory in their Davidson Military Academy van. They take a tour. At one point, we see Dr. Passerian on the phone trying to reach Richard again. Damien stares at him.
And Richard has tried to call him. They're missing each other.
Next, we see Paul. I think he's talking to the board about his famine project.
And they all recoil at when he says the future is in famine.
Yeah, he says we're not exploiting. We're there to help.
They have to guard against the indigenous populations thinking that they are in the business of exploitation and convince them that they're there to help. But Jane interrupts and informs Paul that Dr. Passerian is now at P84.
Yeah, running tests.
Yes.
On, I guess, what is their chemical vats or where they're making their fertilizer and pesticides and whatever.
Yeah. And Paul wanted to know when he was in that area.
So Passerian and another man are running tests, and one of the I call them vats. I don't know what they are. Fails and blows the man back.
Oh, I think they're valves. So they're checking valves.
Okay.
And then one fails. And then so they're like, 29 is fine. 54 is fine. But 14S, woo, that's a problem.
And then it blows, killing the first guy instantly, I guess from the fall, if nothing else.
Yeah, but his face is
green
and he's foaming at the mouth. So, but the kids are starting to get engulfed in poisonous gas.
Right. So they go running out. Passerian is on his little radio there, headset radio, tells them to shut down the valve or whatever, but they can't. It's failing. It's not responding to their commands.
The boys get out. Passerian almost gets to the top of the ladder when the poison's kind of sinking underneath him, but he doesn't make it.
That's right.
So add him to the list.
The boys are all coughing except for Damien.
Do they kill Passerian because he knows about the murders? So he won't.
I think so.
Because otherwise he was participating
he keeps trying to reach Richard to tell him about the murders.
Okay. But he was kind of on board and he was out there looking for the land and everything. So I was just surprised.
I don't think Paul is telling Richard everything.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So he doesn't want
I mean?
Richard. Yes, I see now. Okay.
Because probably if Richard would have heard about it, he would have shut the fucking thing down.
Right.
No.
Or at least investigated it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So next, we're at the hospital where the boys are being examined. And all of them are fine, but they were all affected somewhat by the, I guess, poison gas or whatever. But according to the doctor's tests, Damien was not affected at all. And the doctor would like to keep Damien for a few more tests.
And Richard says, fine, go ahead. But
Anne does not like it.
Anne steps in.
So she says, can't we bring him back next week? And the doctor says, sure, that'll be fine. Oh, the doctor is Meshock Taylor. I knew he looked familiar. Right, so next we see the doctor in his lab with his Bunsen burners and bubbling flasks.
Bubbling colored chemicals that don't exist.
Red chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
Looking through.
See, did you see that? Every time someone's going to die, there's red. Did you notice that?
No,
she's in the red coat, the red Bible, the red chemicals. It's kind of like.
But Passerian wasn't wearing red. Well, the valves are red. The wheels are red.
Yeah, he points out that wheel that's red. I only thought of it because if you watch, I'm sure you've seen The Godfather. I can't remember if it's 1 or 2, but I was watching it
Karen, and I've never seen The Godfather.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
Oh, well, if you have, in 1 or the other, I can't remember if it's 1 or 2.
Our shot is red, Karen.
Oh, God. Every time Marlon Brando, he's like has an orange. Like what I said to Nick, what are all these oranges in this movie?
Doesn't he suck on an orange a lot or something?
Yeah, and every time there's an orange, someone's gonna die. Because I looked it up because it was distracting to me. So then I started to notice that more in movies. And this is every time there's something red, someone's gonna die. So I am not drinking that shot now. Thank you very much.
I have one left. I'll save it to the end.
Okay. Let's see if we can make it. If you hear Latin chanting, though, stop.
So the doctor's looking through a microscope and reading books, checking references, I guess. Apparently, Damien has jackal blood.
Okay, this is so
blood marrow, actually.
He's looking at a cell in a microscope and some books, and he narrows it down in a matter of no time to a jackal.
We don't know how
cell.
long he's been looking at those books, Dr. Karen.
But I forgot that he had jackal cells. I forgot that.
So the doctor calls one of his colleagues and said he's going to come down. There's something he doesn't quite know what to make of or whatever. And he takes the slide with him and the book. He gets on the elevator on the 23rd floor, Karen.
He wants to go to 16.
He wants to. But the elevator goes up instead of down.
And the chanting starts.
And we hear Latin.
And he looks like he hears it too. That's why I was wondering.
So the elevator goes all the way to the top and stops.
And I said, he's going to fall, isn't he?
Then suddenly it falls, Karen.
And he seems very calm as the elevator is plummeting
Yes.
down. Did you notice that?
He is slamming the red button to stop it, Karen.
Yes, he is. The emergency button is red.
Then all of a sudden it stops. And of course he's on the floor.
Floor 3, it stops.
But apparently the cables have broken, Karen. So that causes the other cable to fall from the top, cut through the elevator and the doctor, cutting him in half. He go.
Yeah, if he was just standing on one side or the other, he'd be fine.
He'd be fine.
But they do cut him in half, which is probably the goriest scene in the whole movie. It's okay, but it's not as good as the head decapitation from the first one. The way it bounced and rolled.
Yeah, that's true.
Or spun and then rolled off.
That's true. Next, we cut to the Thorns at their country home. Reading the newspaper. Doctor killed in freak accident. And Richard tells Anne that the doctor was concerned that Damien had a different cell structure. That's why he wanted to keep him. Next, we cut to Charles at the museum looking at artifacts from the dig. He finds Bugenhagen's box.
A box has arrived. It's cold in the room, so he walks over to turn on the heat, and then we see that there's boiler room is right there in his office, basically. They show us that. And there's a box sitting on the table that says fragile.
Fragile.
Yes. When he opens it, it's the briefcase.
What's the box? Box with the daggers and newspapers and the letter that Bugenhagen wrote. Because in the beginning he says, you must get this box to, Richard Thorn. There's a letter in there explaining everything, right?
I did notice, yes. He's not wearing gloves. He's just handling all this stuff, which could be ancient artifacts. He doesn't take any precautions whatsoever. But yes, it has newspapers, notebooks, another notebook, the letters, and the daggers.
He locks the daggers and the box in his desk drawer.
Separate. The daggers are on top and the box is on the bottom.
Yes. But he does take a crucifix and the letters with him. And he leaves the Thorn Museum. Cut to the Thorns at their country home again, watching a movie.
Is it Black Beauty or Flicka?
That's what I thought. I didn't know. There's a black horse in it. That's all I know.
And it's a happy ending.
The doorbell rings.
Before that, Mark is up in the projection room.
Yes.
They're watching a literal film, like it's rolling through a projector, and it goes off a little bit. And Damian yells up, "Projectionist, fix it." Kind of, again, brotherly banter. So Mark is up in the projection room and the movie ends and Anne goes to make corned beef sandwiches and the doorbell rings. So Damien says he'll go get it.
Charles is there and he is visibly shaken when Damien answers the door.
Yes, he's not happy about that.
Charles goes to talk to Richard. He asks what happened to his brother in England. Charles tells Richard about Bugenhagen's box. And Mark watches from the projectionist booth.
Yeah, they don't know that he's up there or still up there. Because Charles closes all the doors, wants to talk to Richard, but they didn't realize that Mark could hear everything.
Charles tells Richard that Bugenhagen believes that Damien is the Antichrist, but Charles ain't buying it. He refuses to read Bugenhagen's letter. Richard says the wall arrives in New York tomorrow and that he's going to go look at it.
Yeah, I thought Richard was going to throw the letters in the fire because there's a point where Damien's throwing wood on the fire. They feature the fire. I thought he was just going to toss them, but he doesn't.
No. Next, we cut to Mark reading the book of Revelations in his room that night.
Because Charles mentions it when he's talking to Richard.
And we cut to Richard reading Bugenhagen's letter. Next morning, Mark goes for a walk. Richard tells Anne about Damien and the letter. Richard promises that he won't go to New York or treat Damien any differently because she's worried about it.
She's begging him. She's more than worried. She's really upset, begging him.
They hug, and as they do, Richard sees Damien walk by through the window. He's going for a walk too.
And he does feel differently about it because he knows Mark's out there. Then he sees Damien. So he says, let's get dressed and go outside with the kids. We need some fresh air. So he is already treating him a bit differently because he's suspicious of him.
See Mark walking through the woods and Damien following. Richard and Ann follow as well, walking behind them. Damien catches up to Mark and Mark confronts him. Mark tells Damien what Charles told Richard. Mark runs away, but Damien tells Mark he loves him as a brother.
Damien admits it.
Yeah, it says Mark tells Damien the beast has no brother. And he tells Damien that he killed his mother, Damien's mother.
But he says, I didn't. That wasn't my mother.
Yes. And that's when Mark throws it at him. No, your mother was a jackal. Then Damien tries to turn Mark. You don't know the power of the dark side.
Actually, it's kind of
Join me and we can rule the universe.
It's kind of sweet, really, because this is the only person he seems to really care about.
Yeah.
Is Mark. And I mean, you don't have a sibling, so maybe, you don't feel that, but he really does. He says, don't make me beg. Mm-hmm. Just come with me. He really doesn't want to hurt Mark. You can tell.
Doesn't. But Mark refuses. Then Damien gets real serious.
You would think that Mark would be a little more interested in finding out more. I mean, in a scan of like a couple of hours, he's convinced Damien's the devil. I mean, he's had a 7-year relationship with this
He might
kid.
want to keep his options open. He might,
Well, right. Or just...
What do you have to offer, Damien? What are we talking about here?
Or go along and work your good deeds from the inside without being killed. Like, give yourself a little time to see what's really happening. Mm-hmm. But no, I guess he's got a moral compass, Greg, unlike the rest of us.
But then Damien, as I said, gets real serious. And he says, I'll ask you once more. Please come with me.
He really does want him to, though.
He does. Mark shakes his head no. And then he grabs his head. Looks to be in quite a bit of pain, Karen. He falls. He gone. Damien screams and cries.
Yeah, again, I think that's real.
It is real. Yeah, he didn't want to do it.
Add him to the tally. Did you add him?
Got him. Richard and Ann arrive and find Mark. Damien tells them he did not do anything. They tell him to go back to the house.
He says it more than once. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. He just fell. He just fell. Which, why would you say I didn't do anything unless you did something? Mm. You just say, he just fell. He just fell. You wouldn't say I didn't do anything.
Cut to the funeral. Paul and Sergeant Neff make eyes at each other.
Yeah, they do. The sergeant smiles a little. How can Damien stay there with all those prayers going on? Remember when he was little and he couldn't go in the church?
No, he's not in a church.
I guess, but
maybe he's over that.
It's sacred ground.
I don't think it bothers him now.
No, he's matured. He's 13 now. Yes. He's entered manhood.
Yes, he's going through changes.
Yes.
He's maturing.
That Paul would love to talk to him about.
So we hear that apparently Mark died from an aneurysm because we hear conversation the doctor has with Richard and Ann as the funeral's going on, I guess.
Yes.
Richard's replaying it in his head or something, and we hear it. Next, we see Richard catching a plane to New York. He doesn't want to go. He has to go.
Yes, someone needs him,
Charles
says.
needs him.
I guess, yes, it is Charles.
Ann and Damien wave as he takes off.
I'm surprised the plane makes it.
I know.
Why didn't he just kill him then?
I know. Richard arrives at a church in a taxi, and he meets with a priest who tells him that Charles is absolutely terrified and refuses to speak to him. So Charles
the reverend says that, yeah.
Yeah. So they go to the room where Charles is. Charles opens the door and pulls Richard in and locks the door. He tells him he's seen the wall and everything is true, and he is a bit hysterical, Karen.
Yes, he's almost unbelievable in his hysteria. It looks a lot like the photographer's room in the first movie. Remember, he was in a small room.
Yep.
With all the crosses and stuff.
So they go to a train yard, Karen. Apparently that's where the wall is, in a train car marked Thorn Industries. And we see train cars coupling up, Karen. I think that's more foreshadowing, just so you know.
Thanks for the heads up.
And Richard and Charles are going to look at the train car containing the wall. Richard unlocks the train car and goes in. Charles refuses. He waits outside.
As they're walking there, there's a huge crane that's holding one of the cars above them. And you think, oh, it's going to drop on them, but it doesn't. And again, I don't know why it didn't happen there, but.
Because wanted you to think it would, and it didn't. It's a
reverse jump scare.
Yeah, it's a reverse jump scare. So then we see a lever on a train move, Karen, sending it forward.
With lots of Latin chanting.
Can't be good when there's Latin chanting.
Nope.
Did you make a note of the Latin, Karen, what it says?
I told you 100 times. I'm not going to tell you it.
So Richard sees the wall, and he sees a picture of an adolescent Damien. I mean, I guess the eyes look similar, but I didn't think everybody looked a whole lot like him.
I didn't think so either. I wouldn't have necessarily recognized
Not as much as the
it.
first one of the young Damien. The train and its car.
So the engine is basically pushing other cars down a track, and it's switching on its own. So it has a purpose.
Yes, and it impales Charles and crushes him against another train car. He go.
Add him to the tally. All we see are his feet
dangling
a couple of inches above the ground, but no blood.
Nope. Richard gets out and finds the body.
It slams into the car that Richard is in. Correct. So a lot of the artifacts are destroyed, and Richard's kind of buried in artifact rocks. And he gets out and then sees Charles.
I believe the wall is destroyed.
Yes.
Cut to the Davidson Military Academy graduation. They're giving awards, Karen. And the highest award, the Officer Saver, is awarded to Damien.
The highest honor. So I guess he shored up his military stuff.
Anne is sitting there. Anne and Paul are sitting there, and Anne gets a message that Richard will be arriving shortly, and she leaves. Cut to Richard getting off the plane. He tells the driver to go collect Damien and bring him to the museum immediately.
Yes, Damien's at the cotillion.
Yes. Next, we see Damien at the cotillion with a couple ladies, Karen, one on each arm.
Yes, and distracting quite a few more. Which is funny because he's 13.
Yes.
But whatever. Well, he's entering manhood now.
Yes, he is. So Richard tries to convince Anne that Damien is behind all the killings. They're at the museum. Driver comes to collect Damien. Damien leaves, tells the girls, "Sorry, girls, I got to go."
Yes. And they do. They go, aw. But Paul and Sergeant Neff both let him go.
They do. It's all part of the plan, Karen. It's all part of the plan, I think. So we see Richard and Anne looking through Charles's office. Richard is looking for the daggers. Anne tries to reason with Richard. Richard tells her the boy has got to die. Richard turned pretty quick, I think. But
once he saw the wall, does he know wasn't there a specific order the daggers had to go in? Does he know it?
I don't know. Maybe it's in the letter that he read.
Maybe.
Damien arrives at the museum.
There's Latin chanting.
Richard pries open Charles's desk and gets the daggers. Anne tries to stop him. Damien enters and hears them arguing. Richard tells Anne to give him the daggers. She pulls out a handful of daggers and stabs Richard. She says, "Here's your daggers."
And I said, I knew it.
She says, "I've always belonged to him."
Yes.
Anne screams Damien's name as fire erupts, I guess, from the boiler in Charles's office, consuming her, Karen.
Yeah, so why did she have to die?
She go.
Because she was protecting him the whole time. Because she killed Richard?
I guess. Cleaning up loose ends. Richard's dead. They're stabbed. Ann is there.
But
Guilty of stabbing.
But he's only 13. So if they made up a story or the boiler, I don't know, she would have taken care of him.
Cleaning up loose ends, Karen. Destroying the evidence.
Who's going to take care of him now?
Well, he's got lots of people, Karen, including the driver.
Well, that's true. I guess he has
got
all
the driver. He's got Paul. He's got Sergeant,
and he's got all the Thorn Industries monies now. Yeah, so I guess he's going to be all right. I don't know though. A kid loses both sets of parents. That's got to be suspicious.
Damien walks out of the museum to the car waiting for him. Then we have words to read, Karen. It says, "For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ." 2 Corinthians 11:13, Karen. Credits.
We do see Damien and the chauffeur exchange a knowing look right at the end.
Mm-hmm. And I made a note that Miss Grant's clothes were by Burton Miller, Karen, if you were wondering. Did you like Miss Grant's clothes?
Not particularly.
Really?
No. The only thing I really liked was the red coat.
And there's a song playing at the end, Karen, and it's Latin, but I did pick up a couple words. I believe they're saying Ave Satani. Is what they're saying, Karen. What's that mean?
I don't know.
Okay.
I didn't hear any of that.
Oh, you didn't watch the credits. The end. All right, Karen, what did you really enjoy about this film?
It's an excellent sequel.
It is good as far as sequels go.
I think that for sure. I think the acting was really good. The kids were good.
Yeah. I mean, you got William Holden, Lee Grant, and lots of good actors in it. Not quite the star power of the first one, but still very good actors. What else?
I mean, once you say it's a great story with great actors, there's not really... There were a couple scenes that were good that you mentioned that I really liked. When he was about to read the Bible and discover who he was, that was a great scene. I think the scene where in the beginning where he's walking and they're filming him through the fire, that was cool. So there was some good foreshadowing, and there was a lot of thought put into it. And I'm sure when you've watched it more than once, it will become a lot clearer. Like, I didn't notice really the cake having the hockey scene on it. I thought it was a weird topping to a cake, but I didn't really see what it was. It didn't just say happy birthday, and it wasn't like a military thing, which would have been, I would have thought would have happened. I did notice the red stuff. So there was a lot of thought in it. It wasn't just thrown together as a sequel just to make a sequel. So I like that about it too. What about you? What did you like?
Well, I specifically wrote down foreshadowing and music.
But they didn't use the original music.
It is. Well, they're both by Jerry Goldsmith. It's by the same composer. Same themes. They repeated themes.
I
know that Ave Satani is in the first one. I know that.
But the Damien, the actual music that you associate with the movie isn't in this one, is it?
Yeah, it's in this one. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't notice it.
Oh, yeah,
as much as the first. All I noticed was the Latin chanting all the time.
I like the red thing that you brought up. Now I have to watch it again and look for red. And as I said, it goes along with our cocktail, Karen.
Well, you knew that, of course. Look at you. Not just the name, but the color. You're on fire. Pun intended. Pun intended.
There you go. Hi, Karen, anything you didn't like?
It was a little slow in some ways and a little meandering for me. It seemed like, I don't want to say it's bad because it was character development and everything, but there were a lot of subplots that took up a lot of time that you didn't really need all that information. I don't know, with the doctor going off to the other countries, him coming back, the phone calls, I don't know. It just seemed a little, and there were things a little bit like he discovers who he is. He's upset for about, what would you say, an hour, maybe 2. And he's like,
Yeah,
okay,
an
cool.
evening.
Cool. I'm the Antichrist. Excellent. Let's go with it.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
You know, I think as a 13-year-old, that might be a little hard to handle, but I don't know. So there were some quick emotional things. Even when he's going off to New York, he just buried his kid. They're going along like everything's normal, which I imagine if that actually happens, I can't think of how your life would ever be normal again. I don't know. Things like that, because they took so much thought and time with some things, and it seemed like little thought and little time with others, especially the emotional impact of a lot of the things that were happening. But it was a little long, I thought. There were things that didn't need to be shown. They could have been implied or something. I don't know. We didn't mean to make Mr. Brady any more evil. We knew he was evil. You know, we knew he was in on it. The sergeant didn't really play much of a role except to let us know that, you know, he was protecting him at the military academy. We could see where all the protection was. There was protection in his home. There was protection at the academy. There was protection in the museum. There was protection in the car. There was always protection. Is there anything you didn't like in it?
I disagree with you. I didn't think it dragged or anything. The thing that bothers me about the plot story, whatever, is that it feels rushed at the end and ends abruptly. I've always felt that about it.
Well, it ends abruptly because he's killed his whole family. And you're kind of thinking, well, where's he going to go? And like I said, he killed his whole previous family. Well, or his whole previous family was killed.
Well, he didn't kill them all. He didn't kill all of his. Well, I guess he did kill. He didn't kill his aunt. The Raven did that.
But still, that stigma around you of wherever you go, it's like my dad used to say, because my mom would always watch Murder, She Wrote. And he would always say, I would never be in the same town as the Murder, She Wrote
Angela
lady.
Lansbury.
Because somebody's always going to die. So even though he wasn't physically doing it, anytime you said anything bad about him, you could die. And Anne does kill Richard. So he doesn't kill Richard, but he's 13. He can't be on his own. I guess one of the other the famine guy's probably going to adopt him or something. But you better be on your toes, you know, and not say anything bad. Because the Raven.
When we watch the third one, we may fill in some of those blanks, Karen.
Great.
Anything we learned today?
We learned what a tell was.
Mm-hmm.
We learned a lot about the whore of Babylon.
Yes.
And her cup of filth and deceit. You got an Iron Maiden reference in there. Star Wars Dark Side. Trumpet versus bugle. Sloppy percussioning. I mean, if you paid close attention,
I'm going to be looking for, I'm going to watch it again, like I said, and watch for Red.
You learned a lot of dates if you paid attention.
Yeah, lots of history.
You know, history dates of things if you paid close attention, which I did not. Well, maybe I'm wrong about the Red. You'll have to tell me, but I did notice.
Kind of makes sense the more I think about it.
It started mostly because of her coat. I don't know if there was anything red when the guys were in the
I don't think there
dig.
was.
So, you know, I could be wrong, but it did seem that way to me when I was watching after I noticed her coat. And that made me think of the Bible that the aunt had as I watched through. But I don't remember seeing red at the dig site.
What'd you think of our shot, Karen?
Well, I sipped about half of it. Mine is strong. That's definitely Satan's spawn. It'll warm you up. If you've got a chill,
takes your voice away from you too. When
it's kind of constricts your
first
throat
one
a
I
little
did
bit.
when I was recording the video.
Did you cough?
Oh yeah, that's good. That was good.
Yeah, kind of makes your throat close.
Thanks for watching.
I think I would like
that
it
is
better
pretty good
without the hot sauce. Personally, I would have a chaser. Have something to,
milk.
Well, or even just something to kind of make it so you can talk. But it fit perfectly. Not only the name, but if I'm right about the red, then the red color is perfect too. So kudos to you.
All right, Karen. What kind of cocktail rating given this film?
It's a tough one. Because I think you'd give it a 2, but I think it's a 3. But
it's not as good as the first one.
That's the problem. And I think we gave that one a 2. Didn't we? I think
we did, yeah. It's
a fantastic sequel, though. It's really good as sequels go. There's continuity. There's, it's just not made up.
The beginning credits, they say, based on characters by Richard Seltzer, right? Who wrote the first one, wrote the screenplay and everything. And they tried to get him to write this, but he didn't want to.
Really?
Yeah. He said he was like above writing sequels or something like that at the time, but whatever. But later, he commented that if he had written the second one, he would have said it the day after the first movie ends. That's where he would have picked up.
Really?
With Damien, a child living in the White House.
Oh.
Because he's with the president.
He was with the president. That's right.
At the end of the first one. So that could have been interesting.
Well, they do take him right to the military. And I didn't know if it was some sort of military comment that the Antichrist wins the top prize at the military school. I don't know if that's some sort of commentary, good or bad, but.
And apparently William Holden was offered the role of Robert Thorn for the first film, but he turned it down because he did not want to star in a picture about the devil.
Guess he changed his mind.
But apparently he changed his mind, Karen, as the Omen went on to be a huge hit. And he said, "Hey, I'll do the sequel."
Sign me up.
All right, so 3 cocktails.
I would say so.
If we had halves, I would give it 2.5.
I agree.
But we don't.
It's an interesting concept to think about what it would take for you to turn on your own child. It's a difficult conundrum, I think, because it would take an awful lot. In this one, he didn't really, actually, in probably the first one too, they don't really have physical evidence. They don't see him do anything.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't do anything.
So he does have the mark, but you'd think you'd want people to verify, like, do you see that? Because I see, you could think, well, maybe I'm losing it. Maybe I've got issues. Maybe, I've convinced myself. It would take an awful lot, I think, to turn a parent against a child like that, which is part of the horror of it, in my mind.
All right, Karen, I believe next film is your choice. Is it not?
It is.
And what film we'll be watching next week?
Well, in the spirit of sequels, we're going to head down that road.
Okay. Go on.
We're going to watch Leprechaun 2.
Did you choose this just because we're all of a sudden doing sequels, Karen, or is there another reason?
Well, it's close to St. Patrick's Day. You can't be the only one who does sequels, and I'm sure this one is excellent.
Leprechaun 2. Do you have a cocktail, Karen?
I do.
And what would that be?
It's called the Drunk Leprechaun.
Okay.
You're going to need vodka, orange juice, and blue curacao.
Got all that.
Yep, we do.
Anyone you need to thank this week, Karen?
Well, as always, we need to thank our listener. There's a lot of podcasts out there. Thank you for spending time with us. What about you, Greg? Who do you need to thank?
Karen, I need to thank the people of the great state of California.
Again, stepping up.
And also the band Verse 13 for once again providing all the music in the Scary Spirits podcast.
The music definitely makes the podcast better.
Oh, by the way, Karen, our death total, you want to take a guess?
9.
11.
Ah,
not bad.
I was surprised it wasn't 13. Should have been 13, right?
All right, Karen, anything else?
Please drink responsibly.
Yes.
Thanks so much for listening. Want to keep in touch? Check out our website, scaryspirits.com. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Scary Spirits Podcast. Find us on YouTube at Scary Spirits Podcast. If you have questions or comments, you can email us at info@scaryspirits.com. To help us grow the podcast, you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We really do appreciate your support. And as always, please drink responsibly.